Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Bednars, and I am a junior doctor in Dundee, Scotland, and you're listening to the Patient Will See You Now podcast. I have to say, this podcast is for educational use only, and you should not be using this as medical advice or opinion. Please go see your doctor if you have any medical questions. This podcast is supposed to be fun and educational. So now that I got that out of the way, let's get into this week's topic. Mayer-Rokitansky-Küster-Hauser Syndrome. That's a mouthful, but I'm glad we can just call that one MRKH instead. Or sometimes some people call it vaginal agenesis, but for today, we're going to stick with MRKH. MRKH is a serious one for women and can really have some psychological turmoil behind it. So let's get into it. MRKH is a congenital, which is just a fancy word for a disease present at birth, malformation characterized by a failure of the Mullerian duct to develop. What's a Mullerian duct? Well, I'm glad you asked, but don't worry. Remember, I'm going to try to make this simple. When a woman is pregnant and a baby girl is starting to take form, there are a few important structures that develop into the female reproductive system, and they are the Mullerian duct, the urogenital sinus, and the gonads. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but just to make it simple, the gonads make up the ovaries in a woman, the urogenital sinus makes up the lower 2/3 of the vagina, and the Mullerian duct develops into the fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, and the upper 1/3 of the vagina. So the Mullerian duct makes most of it, and in MRKH syndrome, the Mullerian duct just fails to form. The reason, unfortunately, the cause of this is unknown, but we can see that there are some genetic mutations that can just unfortunately happen randomly. So what happens? A baby girl will be born without the organs I mentioned above, which are the fallopian tubes, the uterus, cervix, and the upper 1/3 of the vagina, making the vaginal canal really short. About 1 in 5,000 women have this, so it really isn't that uncommon. It's just unusual that we don't hear about it that often. Young women can sometimes feel uncomfortable or ashamed that they haven't had their menstrual period yet, which, by the way, MRKH is actually the second most common reason for primary amenorrhea, or the fact that they don't have a womb to carry a child in the future. And we can't forget about the sex as well. Sex for these women who have MRKH syndrome can be really, really painful and unpleasant since the full vaginal canal hasn't been formed. So, this can also be embarrassing and hard for some to have intimate relationships since they can be afraid that their partner just might not understand. To make it clear, this doesn't make a woman look any less of a woman at all. Her ovaries are still totally intact and still producing estrogens and progesterones that any woman makes. So a woman with MRKH will still develop secondary sex characteristics like breast development, widening of the hips, and even underarm and pubic hair. She'll still go through all the teenage hormones that any girl can have. The only thing really different is that she won't have a period or the physical symptoms that come with it, like cramps. So, wait, if she still has ovaries, can she still have kids? Technically, yes. There are ways for a woman with MRKH to have her own kids. We do this by harvesting the eggs from the ovaries. And with the science we have now, we can take the sperm from her partner or whomever and then be put into a surrogate who will carry the child for her. Another option is to have a uterine transplant and have the kid that way as well. Will a woman with MRKH be able to have a normal sex life? Also, yes. The main issue is that the vaginal canal is too short, making sex painful and unpleasant. However, women with MRKH will be given dilators from their OBGYN to use every day to elongate their vagina slowly. That's the most common and least invasive way of managing this. The dilators are to be used almost every day until a woman starts having regular sexual activity. However, if these don't work, there are surgical interventions. One procedure is called the Vecchietti procedure, where an acrylic olive is placed at the end of the vaginal canal, and then there's a device on the abdomen that is connected to the olive, and it pulls on the olive, and this should elongate the vagina by 1 to 1.5 centimeters each day. So the woman will have this device on for about 7 to 9 days, and then this gets taken off. But the woman still needs to use dilators afterwards to make sure it doesn't contract on itself. Another surgical intervention is something called the McIndoe procedure, where surgeons will take a split thickness graft from the patient's butt, place it over a mold, and basically make a vagina, and then surgically insert it back into the body. Again, dilators still need to be used afterwards. However, just like any surgery, there can always be complications. So that's why we try to stick with the simplest way of managing MRKH, which is just using dilators or even encouraging the patient to have regular sexual activity. So now that I gave a brief description of MRKH, let's listen to our guest today, Bryony, who has MRKH, and what her story is.
Hello.
Hey, is this Bryony?
It is, yeah. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Am I saying your name right? Bryony.
Yeah, that's right,
All
yeah.
right, great. Well, this is Robert from the Patient Will See You Now podcast, and I'm calling you today to do this interview. So, is it all right if we just get started?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Perfect. So, Bryony, how about you just let the listeners know what you have, what is your definition of it, and I guess just how it started right from the beginning. When did you notice there were some symptoms? When did you notice something was strange? And then when did you get to that diagnosis? And we'll go from there.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my name's Bryony. I have a condition called Mayer-Rokitansky-Küster-Hauser Syndrome, quite a long one. And my understanding of my definition is literally just that young girls, when they're in the womb, their uterus and like part of their vagina doesn't grow properly. So there's like 3 parts to the vagina, and we've got the first part, but then like 2 and 3 don't exist, but we've still got our ovaries. So it's just like the uterus and everything, it doesn't grow properly. So I just don't have a uterus, so can't carry children on our own unless you get a transplant or something, or through surrogacy or adoption. Yeah, and so my first initial like understanding that something maybe wasn't right was I was 18 and I still hadn't got my period. And like, to be fair, in my family, my mum got hers quite early, but then my auntie got hers quite late. So it wasn't uncommon for us to be, I guess, not on time in my mum's side of the family. So we weren't really worried about it that much. But then I got to 18 and I was going to go off to university, and I was thinking, okay, maybe I should get it checked out before I go away from home, before I go away from my family. Maybe I should check that everything's okay. So I saw my GP, and she said that she thought maybe I just had like I don't know, like a solid hymen that just needed to be broken rather than one that could be broken naturally. So she thought she was going to send me to an OBGYN to just get that surgically done, and then maybe that would be like everything would be completely normal after that. So we kind of went to my OBGYN appointment thinking, oh, I just need a quick little surgery to sort myself out, and then everything will be normal after that. But we obviously had an ultrasound, and then they saw something was abnormal. So I had a second one. That's where they found that I've got my ovaries and everything, but yeah, there's nothing else there. I haven't got a uterus or anything. And then spoke to the OBGYN, and she said, you know, this is your condition, this is what it is. It's 1 in 5,000, which is crazy, because I mean, that's so many of us have this condition, but it's so unheard of. And then my GP doesn't even know what this is. Like, this isn't like that common. So yeah, that was it. I went to my doctor and spoke to them about it, and then we did some blood tests to see if like everything else was normal with me. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
So I have a bunch of questions to ask you following all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you were 18 when you were like, oh, not having a period, this is kind of strange. How old were your friends when they all got their periods? Were they a little bit younger, or were you kind of thinking, hey, I'm not getting my period the same age as you guys, this must be kind of strange?
Yeah, well, there was some people in my school were sort of like age 12, 13. And then some people were like age 16 to 17. So I was kind of like, oh, I'm just, the last one. Like, maybe it's not that bad. And then so my auntie was quite late. I think she was 17 or 18. So I thought, oh, maybe it's just something I'm very similar to my auntie with. But got to 18. And because I was going away to university, I was like, it's better to just get it checked out and have it be nothing. So we just went to the doctor and then went from there.
Mm-hmm. And then, so while you were in high school, when you were younger than 18, were you ever sexually active? And was that ever an issue or any of your relationships?
No, I was quite timid. I wasn't really sexually active with anyone. There was my first, I guess, proper boyfriend when I was in college when I was 17. We started, getting sexually active, but we realized that nothing was working. And I just thought it was me being a bit weird. I don't know. I thought it was just me being awkward, and I didn't put two and two together at that time. And then when I realized, actually, I haven't got my period, maybe it's something to do with that. That's when I thought, okay, right, I'll rip the Band-Aid off and go and see my doctor and see if everything's normal. So 17, I guess, is when I really started properly thinking about maybe something was wrong. But before that, I just thought, oh, this is normal. I'm just late.
So you were 17 and you were thinking that this is abnormal. What was the thing that was most abnormal to you? Was it the relationship that you had with your boyfriend, or was it more the fact that you didn't have your period?
It was more the fact that I didn't have my period. That was the biggest thing. Everything like on physically looking at me, like physically everything's normal. I have hormones, like I grew properly and like things like that. That there was only the period not being there was the biggest step that I think that made it come to light.
So when your GP said, hey, I think you just have a solid hymen that we need to break it, let's just send you to an OBGYN, what was your reaction then?
I was kind of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Done. I thought that was kind of going to be the end of it. I was just going to go in and have some surgery and then walk away like, da-da-da, I fixed it. It's all good. But yeah, so me and my mum both specifically went into this appointment with my OBGYN thinking, oh, okay, this is fine. Just need to get booked in for a surgery and that's it. But when we started doing tests and everything, I was like, oh, maybe it's not.
So that's when your OBGYN decided to do this ultrasound, realized, hey, I don't think we need to break anything here.
Yeah.
This might be something else. And that's when she kind of broke the news to you that this is MRKH syndrome, right?
Yeah, because she was actually, I was very lucky. I went to a Guildford for my OBGYN, and she was actually a specialist. So she knew very much about the syndrome and she knows quite a lot of information about it. So I think I was quite lucky in that respect because she gave me a lot of information. But yeah, we kind of went into it thinking it was just going to be a surgery to get fixed rather than an investigation into what was going on.
So what was your reaction to that then when you were like, oh, it's not that, I'm actually missing a uterus, I'm missing some sexual organs?
I don't know. I guess initially I was just in shock. I didn't really react to it. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then my mum obviously was very emotional because she feels like it was her fault because, I was born in her. She feels like she maybe did something and obviously she didn't. It's just one of those things that happens. But I think initially my mum took it harder than I did because I was only 18. So I wasn't really thinking about kids or anything like that. That wasn't on my mind. I wasn't worried about it. So I think my initial reaction was just kind of, oh, okay, that makes me different and that's something I'll have to get over. But I wasn't worried about it affecting any relationships. I wasn't worried about any of that. I was more upset that my mum was upset than anything else. Yeah.
And so that's another thing that I wanted to get into next. So I'm guessing your OBGYN right there and then explained to you that you aren't able to have kids per se.
Yeah.
What I know you were 18 and you weren't thinking about kids, but you must have had some kind of reaction when you heard that.
Yeah, I mean, it was upsetting. Me and my mum both cried and said, this is hard and it's going to be like an awful thing to go through. But I think I'm just one of those people where if it doesn't directly affect me right there and then, I kind of don't focus on it. And that, I don't know if that's just me, but I felt like I was like, okay, that's kind of horrible, and I was upset, but I need to move on because I've got uni to focus on for now. And then it's now, as I'm getting to because I'm 24 now, I'm 25 on my next birthday. This is the age where I'm starting to think, okay, I might not want kids right now, but I have to start thinking about it because it's going to take a lot longer for me. So I think now it's affecting me more than it did when I initially got told about it, because I'm now having to start thinking about the next steps and thinking, okay, it's going to take me 5 years rather than like literally a split second for some of my friends to get pregnant. So yeah, I think it's harder now.
So a few questions leading up to that, because now you're thinking about having kids. Do you have a partner now?
Yes, yeah, I've been with my boyfriend now for 5 years.
5 years. So I'm guessing everything is pretty great between you two in terms of.
Yeah, it's really good. Really good. He's amazing. He took everything, on the chin and was like, okay, well, we just need to work around it, rather than, he didn't see it as like a hindrance. There was nothing. It was never an issue of like, oh, I don't know if I can be around this. He was always there. So
two major things in MRKH is the fact that it's not impossible, but you can't have kids, and also it's just the sex life. So how did you kind of work around the sex life?
Well, initially, when I left my initial OBGYN appointment, they give you like the dilators and everything, and they encourage you to try and go out there and stretch yourself and, to give you the best sex life you could possibly have. So I went away with my dilators and I was like, okay, I'll just try this. But that was when I was going off to uni, so I didn't have a boyfriend at the time. So I was like, okay, this is going to be the only way that I can kind of, in a sense, normalize myself, I guess. But then since meeting my boyfriend, we just sort of said, okay, it's not going to be easy or comfortable in the first like couple of times. But it's just one of those things where you have to just take it step by step. And now, like, I have stretched myself to the point where it's comfortable for us to have sex, and it seems pretty normal, as much as I can think of it as being normal, because I've never really had anything before him. So yeah.
So these dilators, are these the same dilators that OBGYNs use to do a dilation and curettage kind of deal? Do you know?
I assume so. I think so. They go up in like staggered stages. So like the first one's obviously really small because we have basically nothing, and then they get bigger as you try and stretch yourself and the canal gets bigger. They just go up in stages.
Was it uncomfortable using these?
Painful. I don't know about uncomfortable. Painful is probably because especially for me, I was like just desperately trying to make it normal. So I was desperately trying to stretch myself kind of as quick as possible. So yeah, I don't know about uncomfortable. I was kind of like accepting of it, but it was just painful. And there's only so much you can do to try and make it comfortable for yourself. But at the end of the day, you're not ever going to be happy with the fact that you're having to stretch yourself.
Using dilators for somebody who has MRKH tends to be the most popular way to manage it. But were you offered other ways to manage it or treat it, like surgery or something else?
Well, they initially just gave me the dilators. My OBGYN was very much she wasn't against surgery. She just said, because I was quite young, she said, it's not something you need to necessarily get yourself into now. But she gave me the options for surgery, and she said, go away, think about it, try with the dilators, see how you get on. And then if you really feel like you need to have surgery, then we can come back and do that. But I never felt like it was necessary, because I thought, I don't know, I think the surgery would make it more real for me. I'd rather use the dilators and try and normalize myself that way, personally. But everyone's different. Everyone has different experiences with it. There's a lot of girls that I speak to on like support groups, and they all have very different outtakes on it. And a lot of the girls have been through the surgery. But then my issue with it is that you have the surgery and some of them still need to use the dilators. So I felt it wasn't really necessary putting myself through that strain of going through the surgery to then still need to use the dilators anyway. I might as well just carry on with what I'm doing, if that works for me.
And here you mentioned a support group. What is that, on a website, or is it something? What is that?
It's the Facebook one. It's MRKH Support and Awareness, I think. It's just on Facebook. There's loads of them though.
Okay, and you were able to talk to many women who have this?
Yeah, there's loads of us. It's, a lot of them are people in America. I've spoken to a couple of them that are in America. There's a couple of girls that are from the UK. But yeah, I've spoken to quite a few of them. They're all really good supportive system, and it's called like the silent sisterhood because it's 1 in 5,000. There's loads of us, so it is a sisterhood, but no one really knows about it, and no one really talks about it. So it's the silent one.
Exactly, because once I saw that statistic that it's 1 in 5,000, it's just like, and I rarely, I read about it in books. I read about it in my textbooks for my medical school knowledge, but I've never saw a patient with MRKH. So
Yeah,
it's weird that it seems rare, but statistics show that it's not.
yeah, no, it's crazy, isn't it? It's
It
just yeah,
Yeah, it really is. So when you found out when you were 18, because 18 is still that awkward kind of teenage year still. When you found
yeah,
out, did you tell your friends right away about it? How did they react to it?
yeah. I told them straight away. They were. I think it was kind of mixed reviews because again, people didn't really know about it, and I had literally, obviously, just found out that I had this condition, so they were kind of unsure of what I was telling them. So when I just said basically the basics are, I can't have sex properly. I have to. And I can't have kids, and that was the basics that I gave them. I gave them the rundown of it, and then when I said it's 1 in 5,000, they were like, "What?" It's just crazy that it's 1 in 5,000, but no one knows about it. But they were very supportive, and they one of my friends, as soon as my best friend, when I told her, she was just like, she cried and got upset because she's actually already got a daughter, so she was like, we're the polar opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of she had a kid quite young and I can't have them. But she was really good, and she already offered to be a surrogate for me.
Which was going to be my next question going into it. What is There are options for you to have kids, and so I'm guessing
Mhm.
you want to go through the surrogate route.
I think surrogacy it is the best option for me. I think, but
Because
it's very expensive, and it's just kind of finding the right time to do it, and it's a lot of process.
do you know how much something like that costs, more or less?
Ooh, I don't know. It's very different in America to the UK because the UK has a lot more laws on like surrogate mothers and things.
So just in the UK price, because I'm currently in Scotland right now as well. So just a ballpark cost of what it costs here in the UK.
I'm not sure. I think that one of the girls on the support group, I'm sure she said that she was going through surrogacy, and it said like 10,000. I think.
Wow.
Yeah, but I don't know. I can't remember. That was it's on the support group somewhere. But a lot of them are going through surrogacy.
Yeah, so the way to do it is they would just, since your ovaries are still there and they work just fine, they can just harvest the eggs from your ovaries and then just put it in someone else and get a surrogate and have a kid that way.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about either, I don't know if I want to get into uterine transplants because that isn't so popular, but maybe adoption?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, when I was saying to my mum a while back when I first found out, when I was younger, there was a TV show called Tracy Beaker, and it's all about these kids in foster homes, and I remember watching it and thinking, I can't imagine kids being left in a house like in a foster home and like in children's homes and things like that. So I always really liked the idea of adoption. So adoption would be, I mean, I'm happy to do that. That is completely fine with me. That is a good option for me. There's so many kids that need houses.
So
So yeah,
do you think you would do both, like the surrogacy and adoption? Would that be something in
I
your
don't
future?
know. I think it depends what surrogacy, what the toll would take. I think it depends on the cost of it. It depends on how long it would take and all things like that. I think we'll just have to weigh up the options. Surrogacy is obviously the more ideal choice because you obviously want to have kids with your own DNA and things like that. But I think adoption might be the easier one and maybe less strenuous on us.
Absolutely. Whatever you choose, I'm sure it's going to be the best decision. So really quick, because since we're talking about cost, what about the back to the dilators? Do you have to pay for those, or is that something covered by the NHS?
No, it's covered by the NHS. But I mean, I've only got one set. You don't need to like refresh them. They can just be reused and rewashed and everything. So the one set that I got from my OBGYN, I got given those on my first appointment, and I've had them since.
Oh, really? You just keep using the you
Yeah.
could just wash those and just keep using the same ones. So that's interesting that you now that you're 25 and you still have to use them.
I don't use them as much because the more like sexually active you are, then the you don't need to use them because you're still open, sort of thing. You've stretched yourself enough to stay open.
So what you're saying is the penis acts as a dilator as well, more
Yeah,
or less.
exactly. I know, it's crazy.
So has there ever been a time where your vagina was getting smaller because you weren't using them as much, or any time that you got scared or anything like that?
I've never been scared. The only time was when at university. That was when I could like notice the difference, because I wasn't like as sexually active at uni. So if the nights where I'm like sleeping with someone are so infrequent, I would notice the next time that it was a bit tighter and it was a bit sore, and I was like, oh, okay, I need to use my dilators again.
So I know that MRKH, there's two types. There's a type 1, which is just the sexual organ dysfunction, and also type 2, which has urologic and skeletal anomalies. So there could be some renal anomalies, so like a horseshoe kidney or
Mm-hmm.
maybe a smaller kidney, and sometimes some problems with your bones, like in your spine and your ribs.
Yeah.
Do you experience any of these problems?
No, not me. But I know there's a lot of people that do. A lot of people think they were trying to put two and two together and see if it was to do with the fact that they were premature babies. Because a lot of the people that are type 2 were premature, but I think that's just kind of a coincidence. Because we obviously, when you're in the womb, they start building like your sexual organs and things like that. They do it at a certain stage, and then the body moves on. So I don't think it really is to do with being premature, but that's the theory they're coming up with.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't read that anywhere. So that's actually interesting to know that you found out through these support groups that the ones that do have these anomalies in the skeleton and the kidneys, because maybe
Yeah, I had no idea.
yeah, that could be something. Could be something.
Yeah, maybe. You never know.
Is there anything else that maybe I missed out that you want to add to it?
I don't think so. I think you've got all your facts.
Yeah, it sounds like we got most of it, and the biggest thing is just having kids and the sex life behind it. So then my last question to you is that I ask everybody that's going to be on the show. What advice do you have for others that found out they have MRKH, or what advice would you have for people who know somebody that has MRKH, whether it be their partner or anyone like that?
My biggest advice is get on support groups, because as much as I have this condition, I still don't think I would have the knowledge that I do now if it wasn't for the support groups. Because as much as if you are given this diagnosis and you're given this condition, you're like, oh, okay, you have this condition, you're expected to kind of just know the ins and outs of it. This condition is so rare, like people don't talk about it, they don't know about it. Even some doctors don't know about it. So going on these support groups and hearing all these different stories, it really helped me realize like I'm not alone. It's 1 in 5,000. And that really helped me, especially for my friends and family. It's open support groups as well. So as long as you are on the pages for supporting family or friends or whatever, my family have found it really, really good to go on these support groups and find out how they can help them and how different people might react. Like my brother's recently had a baby, and my mum went on the support group to say, kind of have a browse and see how people were reacting when their siblings are having children and whether it will affect them and things like that. So I would say support groups are key. And the biggest thing is that if you're not happy, if you're not comfortable and you don't really know what you're doing, just talk to someone. The support group is always there, but even if it's with friends or family, or even if it's a doctor, always just talk to someone.
That was great. Perfect. Thank you. I hope anybody that does have MRKH or just anything like that, or knows somebody that has it, just go to these support groups to learn more about it. Just like you said.
It is really the best thing. It's absolutely the best thing I've done.
All right. So, Bryony, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm really hoping that this could let people know that something like this exists, to raise the awareness, to let girls who might think something is a little off to go get checked by the doctor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you again. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much.
That was great. All right. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you too. Bye.
Bye. If you liked this episode, please leave a review, and also make sure to subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're listening to this on so you can catch the future episodes as well. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, please send me an email with a background of what disease you're living with to thepatientwillseeyounow@gmail.com, and I'll let you know if you're selected to be on the show. Don't worry if I haven't gotten back to you right away, because I might get you back for a later show. And if your condition was already mentioned on the show, no worries. I like to show how one disease can affect different people in completely different ways. Again, thank you so much for listening, and catch you next week.